Hello, my name is Nicolas. I am 27 years old, and I work as a personal assistant in a consulting company in Paris in the 8th arrondissement near the Champs-Élysées. It's not a particularly glorious job, if I have to be honest. My official title sounds good on paper, but in day-to-day reality, it means I manage my boss's schedule, book her business lunches, prepare her presentation packs, screen her calls, and make sure her professional life runs like clockwork. I am single. I live alone in a small apartment in the 10th arrondissement near the Canal Saint-Martin, and my life is stable, predictable, without any major surprises. I get up at 6:30 a.m., take Metro Line 7, then Line 1. I arrive at the office at 8 am sharp and spend my days anticipating the needs of a woman I don't really understand, but whom I deeply respect. This woman is Camille Beaumont, my boss, and she is the reason why everything in my life has changed, even though I would never have imagined it a few months ago. Camille is 40 years old, although she could easily be 35. She is a senior partner in our firm, specializing in mergers and acquisitions, and she has a formidable reputation in the business. Tall, slim, always impeccably dressed in dark suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She exudes a natural authority that brings boardrooms to a standstill the moment she walks in. Her brown hair is always pulled back in a strict bun. Her hazel eyes never betray the slightest emotion, and her face remains impassive even in the most tense situations. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, every word counts. She almost never smiles, except during client lunches. And even then, it's a calculated, professional smile that never reaches his eyes. I have been working for her for 2 years now, and during all this time our interactions have been limited to the bare minimum. Instructions given in a clear, firm voice, corrections made to my documents with surgical precision, brief glances when she needs something, a nod when the job is well done. There is an ocean between us, a chasm made up of differences in age, social status, professional experience, and personality. She lives in a world of multi-million euro decisions, dining in Michelin-starred restaurants, and weekends in London or Zurich. I live in a 30-minute studio where the kitchen is also the living room, and I spend my evenings reading or watching series on my laptop. Our worlds only touch in the strictly professional setting of our office, in this renovated Ottoman building where the ceilings are high and human relations are low. The office itself is a perfect reflection of this distance. Camille occupies a huge corner office on the 5th floor with windows overlooking Avenue Montaigne and a clear view of the Eiffel Tower in the distance. His workspace is minimalist, almost austere. A large dark wood desk, 2 computer screens, a designer lamp, and virtually nothing else. No personal photos, no plants, no little objects that humanize a workspace, just pure efficiency. My office is in the anteroom, just outside his door. A strategic position that allows me to control all access to his sanctuary. I am the gatekeeper, the filter, the intermediary between her and the rest of the world. Colleagues sometimes joke that I'm like Cerber, the 3-headed dog who guards the gates of hell. Except in my case, it's just one door and my boss is definitely not Adez, even though she can be just as intimidating. The atmosphere in the office is always tense when Camille is present. People walk more slowly in the corridors, speak in a low voice, triple-check their documents before submitting them to him. She inspires a mixture of respect and fear, and I'm somewhere in the middle, close enough to see the inner workings of her professional machine, but never close enough to understand the woman behind the facade. For 2 years, this dynamic never changed. Our exchanges remained purely functional. Hello, Nicolas. The Mercier file is ready. Yes, Camille. Here is the report you requested. Nicolas, cancel my 3 p.m. appointment. Of course, Camille. It's done. A perfectly choreographed professional dance, without a false note, without surprises, without the slightest opening towards something more personal. I knew his coffee by heart, a double espresso without sugar. But I knew nothing about his life outside the office. I knew she often worked until 10 p.m., but I didn't know if she came home to an empty apartment or if someone was waiting for her. I saw the dark circles under her eyes some mornings, but I would never have dared to ask her if she had slept badly. There was an invisible but absolutely clear line between us, and crossing it was unthinkable, inappropriate, and probably catastrophic for my career. So I stayed on my side of the line, efficient, discreet, almost invisible, exactly what a good personal assistant should be. Then came that Wednesday afternoon in November, a day that changed everything without me immediately understanding it. It was around 5 p.m. Night was already falling, as it does so early in autumn in Paris, and I was finishing preparing a file for a meeting the next morning. Most of her colleagues had already left, but Camille was still in her office as usual. I was about to knock on her door to bring her the documents when she came out of her office, her coat already on her shoulders, her purse in her hand. She stopped in front of my desk, and for the first time since I started working for her, she looked at me in a different way, not as her assistant, but as a person. There was something in his eyes, a hesitation, a vulnerability that I had never seen in him. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then finally asked in a voice that sounded oddly uncertain, "Nicolas, do you live alone?" The question surprised me so much that it took me a few seconds to answer. Why was she asking me that? What did my personal situation have to do with my job? But his tone wasn't intrusive, it was almost fragile. I nodded and said, "Of course, yes, I live alone." She nodded slowly as if my answer confirmed something she already thought. Then she simply said, "Okay, have a good evening, Nicolas." And she left, leaving me completely perplexed, staring at the door she had just disappeared through. I went home that night with this question going around in my head. Do you live alone? Why did she ask me that? Was it just curiosity? No, Camille was never simply curious. Each of these actions had a purpose, a specific reason. Was it linked to a professional project? Perhaps a trip where she would need me to be available without family constraints? But then, why this hesitation, this vulnerability in his voice? I tried to push his thoughts away as I cooked my dinner. Pasta with pesto, nothing fancy. And I sat down on my couch with a book I'd been trying to read for weeks, but I couldn't concentrate. The words scrolled before my eyes without my brain really registering them. It was almost 9 p.m. when someone knocked on my door. Firm, decisive blows, 3 times. I wasn't expecting anyone. My neighbors never bothered me at this hour. I put down my book and went to open it without even looking through the peephole. And when I opened the door, it took my brain several seconds to process the information that was before my eyes. Camille Beaumont, my boss, was standing in the hallway of my building outside my door at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. She was no longer in a strict suit. She wore dark jeans, a gray cashmere sweater, and a leather jacket that gave her a completely different look. Younger, more accessible, almost vulnerable. Her hair was no longer pulled back in a bun, but fell freely over her shoulders, framing her face in a way that completely transformed her. She was holding a paper bag in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. Her face expressed a strange mixture of determination and uncertainty, as if she was surprised to be there herself. We stood there looking at each other in silence for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Then she took a deep breath and said in a voice that no longer had any of the professional coldness I knew, "Good evening, Nicolas. I know this is completely inappropriate and you have every right to shut the door in my face, but can I come in? I brought you dinner and wine. I need to talk to someone tonight and you're the only person I could think of." My brain was completely short-circuiting. My boss, Camille Beaumont, the ice woman who terrorized boardrooms, stood at my door with wine and food, asking if she could come in because she needed to talk to someone. Me, the only person she'd thought of. What did that mean? Why me? What was going on? But despite all my confusion, despite all the professional alarms screaming in my head that this was a terrible idea, that it would complicate our working relationship, that I had absolutely no idea how to handle this situation, I heard myself say, of course, between. And I stepped aside to let her pass, closing the door behind her and unknowingly sealing the beginning of a transformation that would turn our plans upside down. She walked into my small apartment, and I suddenly realized how modest, almost miserable, my space was compared to the world she lived in. My studio with its open kitchenette, my tired second-hand sofa, my coffee table covered with books and magazines, my bed in the corner barely hidden by a curtain. But if she judged my accommodation, she didn't show it. She placed the bag and bottle on my small table, took off her jacket, and turned to me with a small smile that shocked me with its sincerity. Thank you for having me. I had prepared meals from mes omelissons. I hope you like roast chicken and grilled vegetables. And this wine is a Chateau Neuf du Pape that I had at home, and that I was not going to drink alone. I nodded, still in shock, and managed to articulate, "It's perfect. Let me get some plates and glasses." While I rummaged through my closets to pull out the most presentable clothes I had, she settled onto my couch with an ease that was in complete contrast to the rigidity I knew she displayed at the office. It was surreal. My boss was sitting on my couch in my apartment, and we were going to have dinner together, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We began eating in a slightly awkward silence on my part, but she seemed strangely relaxed, almost relieved to be there. The wine was excellent, rich and velvety, the kind of bottle that probably costs what I spend on groceries for an entire month. After a few bites, she put down her fork, took a sip of wine, and said, "Are you wondering what I'm doing here?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I acquired, "Yes, I must admit I'm a little surprised." She gave a small laugh, amé joylessly. "I'm as surprised as you are. Believe me, just this morning I never imagined I'd be here tonight. But something happened today, something that made me realize how empty my life has become." She looked at her glass, swirling it slowly in her hands. "My ex-husband called me this afternoon. We divorced 3 years ago and hadn't had any contact since signing the papers. He wanted to tell me he was getting remarried, that he was expecting a child with his new wife. He was happy, Nicolas, really happy. And I hung up. I sat down at my desk and realized I didn't even remember what it felt like to be happy. Those words hit me like a punch. This woman so strong, so accomplished, so intimidating was there in my apartment, opening her heart to me in a way that left me speechless. I didn't know what to say. "What do you say to that?" I just said softly, "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be sorry. It's my fault. Well, not my fault exactly, but my choices. I chose my career. I chose ambition. I chose to build something solid professionally, and I succeeded. I'm a senior partner at one of the best firms in Paris. I make a very good living. I'm respected in my field, but when I go home at night, there's no one there. When I wake up in the morning, I'm alone. Whether I have good news or a bad day, there's no one to share it with. And today, when I hung up with my ex, I realized I'd built a gilded prison and was locked in it alone." She took another sip of wine, and I saw her eyes shine, not with tears, but with raw emotion that she was barely holding back. And the pathetic thing is, as I searched my mind for someone I could talk to tonight, someone I could just be honest and vulnerable with, the only person who came to mind was you. My assistant, a man 13 years younger than me, who works for me and with whom I've never had a single personal conversation in 2 years. It's pathetic, isn't it? I shook my head immediately. No, it's not pathetic. It's human, and I'm glad you thought of me. I don't know why you did, but I'm glad you're here. Those words came out spontaneously without me planning them, and they were absolutely sincere. She looked at me with an intensity that made me look away. Then she said, "You want to know why I thought of you? Because during these 2 years, you are the only person who saw me every day without ever judging me, without ever expecting anything from me beyond your work. You never flattered me to get a promotion. You never criticized me behind my back like I know some people do. You never tried to use our professional relationship for your personal advancement. You are just there, efficient, discreet, reliable. And today I realize that this was perhaps the most honest relationship I had in my life. As sad as it may seem, we continued to eat and drink. And gradually, the conversation deepened in ways I never imagined possible. She told me about her marriage, how she met her ex-husband in law school, how they had both been ambitious and determined in the beginning, how they had supported each other in their respective careers, then how they had gradually drifted apart. The working hours that were getting longer, the dinners canceled, the weekends sacrificed for urgent matters, the conversations that were limited to daily logistics, and finally the realization that they were no longer a couple, just two roommates who shared an apartment and bills. The divorce was strangely simple, she told me. We didn't even really argue. We just acknowledged that we were nothing to each other anymore. He took his things. I stayed in the apartment and that was it. 3 years of procedure to formalize something that had already been dead for a long time. She paused. The hardest part wasn't the end of the marriage. The hardest part was realizing that I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no regret, just emptiness. And since then, this void has never been filled. I listened, really listened, without interrupting, without offering superficial advice or comforting platitudes. I felt that what she needed was not a solution, but just the presence of someone who would listen to her without judging. So that's what I did. And gradually she relaxed even more. His voice became softer, his gestures more natural. The icy woman I knew at the office was melting before my eyes, revealing a person I had never seen, vulnerable and human and profoundly alone. At one point, she asked me about my life, and I told her about my childhood in Normandy, about my parents who ran a small bakery, about my arrival in Paris for my studies, about my teenage dreams of becoming a writer that I had abandoned for the security of a stable job. She spoke with an attention that touched me, asking pertinent questions, and being genuinely interested in what I was saying. It was strange and wonderful at the same time, this role reversal where she was no longer my boss, and I was no longer her subordinate, where we were just two people sharing a meal and stories in a small Parisian apartment on a November night. It was almost midnight when she looked at her watch and jumped. My God, I didn't realize what time it was. I should go. You must be exhausted. But she didn't move from her place on the sofa, and I didn't even make any attempt to get up. There was something in the air, a connection that had formed over the course of that evening, fragile and precious, and neither of them wanted to break it by ending this moment. Finally, I said, "You don't have to leave. I mean, it's late, and if you don't feel like going home now, you can stay. I can sleep on the couch, you can take my bed." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Nicholas, are you serious?" I nodded. "Yes, I know it's unusual, but this evening has already been unusual. Anyway, no. And honestly, I'd rather know you're safe here than have you take the subway or find a cab at 7 a.m. She smiled. A real smile that lit up his face in a way I had never seen. "Okay, thank you. But I'll take the couch. I'm the one who invited myself to your house. After all, we debated for a few minutes, but she insisted, and finally I gave in. I lent him a clean t-shirt and sweatpants. And while she changed in my tiny bathroom, I laid out blankets and a pillow on the couch. When she came out, dressed in my clothes that were way too big for her hair tied back in a messy ponytail with no makeup, she looked 20 years younger. She was beautiful in a way completely different from the cold, professional beauty I knew. It was a natural, accessible, real beauty. She settled down on the couch, wrapped herself in the blankets, and looked at me with a gentleness in her eyes. "Thank you, Nicholas, for everything, for listening to me, for not judging me, for accepting my presence without asking too many questions. You don't know how much this means to me." I smiled. "That's normal." "Good night, Camille. Good night, Nicholas." I went to my bed corner. I drew the curtain and lay back, staring at the ceiling, my brain racing. What just happened? My boss had spent the evening at my house, opened her heart to me, and was now sleeping on my couch. Tomorrow morning, were we going to go back to the office and pretend nothing happened? Was this just an exception? A moment of weakness on her part that she would regret in the light of day? Where was this the beginning of something different? Something I couldn't even name yet? I didn't know. And strangely, I didn't care. For now, it was enough that this evening existed, that this connection was formed, that I saw a side of her that no one else knew. The rest we'll see. The next morning, I woke up to daylight filtering through my thin curtains. It was 7 hours later than usual. I stood up quietly. I pulled back the curtain and saw that Camille was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the covers, her face peaceful and relaxed in a way I'd never seen her. I decided to let her sleep and started making coffee. The smell woke him up a few minutes later. She opened her eyes, looked disoriented for a second, then remembered where she was. She sat up, ran a hand through her tangled hair. Emma smiles. Good morning. What time is it? 7:15. I made coffee. You are an angel. She stood up, came to the small kitchen table, and accepted the cup I offered her. We drank our coffee in silence. A comfortable silence without the awkwardness I might have feared. Then she said, Nicolas, about last night, I want you to know that I don't regret anything. I needed this conversation, this connection, and I'm glad it's with you. But I understand if you feel uncomfortable about all this, if you'd rather we just pretend nothing happened at the office. I'll understand. I shook my head. I didn't want to pretend like nothing happened. What happened last night was important to me too. I don't know exactly what this means for our professional relationship, but I don't want to erase it. She looked relieved, neither did I. So maybe we can just see what happens. No pressure, no expectations, just be ourselves. I acquired it suits me. She finished her coffee, changed into her clothes from the day before, and before leaving, she stopped in front of the door. See you at the office tonight, Nicolas. See you tonight, Camille. And she left, leaving me in my apartment with the memory of her presence and the certainty that something had fundamentally changed between us. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. At the office, we maintained a professional facade, but there was now a complicity between us that hadn't existed before. Looks that lasted a second too long, discreet smiles when no one else was looking, conversations that, while still on work topics, had a warmth she'd never had before. And in the evening, 2 or 3 times a week, she came to my house. Sometimes she brought dinner. Sometimes we ordered pizza. Sometimes I cooked something simple. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her childhood in a bourgeois family in Lyon, where excellence was expected and failure unacceptable. His father was a surgeon, his mother a piano teacher, and from a young age he was taught that professional success was the only thing that really mattered. Ambition is in my DNA, she told me one evening. But no one has ever told me the price to pay. No one warned me that by building a brilliant career, I would sacrifice everything else. Friendships because I never had the time. Love because I didn't know how to put someone before my job. Family because my parents died when I was 30 and I don't have any children. Now I'm at the top of my profession and I look around and there's no one to celebrate with me. I listened to her, and I began to understand the deep loneliness within her. She had built walls so high around herself that no one could breach them, and now she was a prisoner in her own fortress. But with me, gradually her walls began to crumble. She laughed more easily, a sincere laugh that came from her belly. She relaxed, took off her shoes, and sat cross-legged on my sofa like a teenager. She asked me questions about my opinions, my dreams, my fears, and she really listened to the answers, as if what I said mattered. And I, for my part, discovered a fascinating, complex, wounded, but strong woman who hid beneath her professional armor a sensitivity and depth I would never have suspected. I found myself looking forward to our evenings with an impatience I didn't dare name, smiling when I thought about her during the day, noticing little details about her that I'd never seen before. The way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, the little crease that formed between her eyebrows when she was concentrating, the way she fiddled with her ring when she was nervous. One December evening, as the snow began to fall in Paris and the Christmas lights lit up the streets, she arrived at my house looking different, both excited and anxious. She was carrying a larger bag than usual, and when she placed it on the table, I saw that it contained not only food but also documents. "I need your help," she said, taking off her coat. Not as an assistant, but as a friend, as someone who knows me now. I frowned, intrigued. "Sure, what's going on?" She took out the documents, thick folders with the logo of a company I didn't recognize. I was made an offer. Another consulting firm in London wants to poach me. The position is incredible, a significant promotion, an even higher salary, an opportunity to work on very high-level international files. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I would have jumped on without hesitation a year ago. She paused, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. But now I don't know. For the first time in my life, a career decision isn't automatic, and it's because of you. His confession took my breath away. She was hesitant to accept her dream promotion because of me, because of our nights out, our conversations, this connection we had built. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to stay, to choose what we had over his career. But the other part, the rational part, knew that I couldn't ask him to sacrifice his ambition for a relationship that wasn't even defined yet. "Camille," I said slowly, "I can't make this decision for you. It's your career, your life. If you take this job, I'll understand." "I don't blame you. These past few weeks have been incredible for me too, but I don't want to be the reason you give up on your dreams." She looked at me intensely, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. What if my dreams have changed, Nicholas? What if what I want now isn't just a brilliant career, but also something more, someone to share my life with? What if you've become that person? The silence that followed was charged with electricity. We looked at each other, and for the first time everything was said without words. What we felt for each other was no longer simple friendship or companionship. It was something deeper, more intense, something that frightened us both with its power. I reached out and took hers in my hand. "The table. Camille, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know if it's wise or professional or even reasonable. All I know is that when you're with me, I feel more alive than I have in years. And when you're not here, I think about you constantly." She squeezed my hand and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Me too. And that terrifies me, Nicholas. I'm 40, you're 27, I'm your boss. People will talk, they'll judge, they'll say this is inappropriate or that I'm taking advantage of my position, and maybe they'll be right." I shook my head. "I don't care what people think. The only question that matters is, what do you want?" She took a deep breath, wiped away her tear, and looked at me with a determination I'd only seen in the most important business meetings. "I want you, Nicholas. I want to see where this can take us. I want to stop being afraid and just live. Really live, not just exist through my work, but feel things, be with someone, build something meaningful." Her admission was all I needed. I stood up, walked around the table, and knelt in front of her. I cupped her face in my hands, and for the first time our lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative as if we were testing something fragile that might break if we pushed too hard. Then it deepened, became more urgent, more passionate, releasing all the weeks of tension and unspoken desires that had built up between us. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. Our foreheads pressed together, our eyes closed, savoring this moment of pure, absolute connection. "Stay here tonight," I whispered, "not on the sofa with me." She nodded, unable to speak, and I guided her to my bed. That night, we broke through all the barriers that remained between us, physical and emotional. It wasn't just sex. It was a communion, a mutual recognition that we were now connected in a way that went beyond logic or reason. She fell asleep in my arms, her head on my chest, her breathing slow and steady. And I lay awake for hours, holding her, realizing that my life had just taken an unexpected and wonderful turn. In the morning when I woke up, she was already up, dressed and looking at me with a smile that lit up the whole room. "Hello there," she said softly. "Hello," I replied, still a little sunny. She sat on the edge of the bed. "I've thought about it. I'm going to turn down the London offer. I'm going to stay in Paris with you." The weeks that followed were both intoxicating and complicated. At the office, we had to maintain total discretion, which became increasingly difficult as our feelings intensified. There was something exhilarating about this double life. Professional and distant during the day, lovers and accomplices at night. But we both knew this situation couldn't last forever. Rumors began to circulate, curious glances, whispers in the hallways, colleagues noticing that our dynamic had changed. One day, Mark, another partner at the firm, made a snide remark during a meeting, implying that I must have special skills to have kept my job for so long with a boss as demanding as Camille. She glared at him and replied icily, "Nicholas's skills are beyond reproach. Contrary to your sense of professionalism, Mark, if you have any questions about my management choices, my office is open. Now let's get back to the real subject." Silence fell in the room and Mark hadn't said anything more. But we both knew the situation was becoming untenable. One evening in January, when we were staying at her place for the first time, she had a magnificent apartment in the Marais, modern and elegant, but curiously impersonal, as if no one really lived there. She brought up the subject we were both avoiding. "Nicholas, we need to talk about our situation at the office. People are starting to get suspicious, and sooner or later, someone is going to discover the truth. When that happens, the consequences could be serious, especially for you." I put down my fork. "What do you propose?" She took my hand. "I think you should resign. I know it sounds drastic, but hear me out. You are incredibly competent. You'll find another position without any problem, and I'll help you. I'll give you the best possible recommendations. Once you're no longer working for me, we can be together openly, without having to hide, without risking our careers or our reputations. What do you think?" Your proposal surprised me, but deep down I knew she was right. As long as I worked for her, our relationship would always be seen as inappropriate, potentially as an abuse of power on her part or opportunism on my part. For us to have a real chance together, I had to leave. "Okay," I said after a moment of consideration. "I'm going to resign, but not right away. I want to find a new position first. I don't want to be a financial burden on you or dependent on your help." "Give me a month, maybe 2. She smiled, relieved. "Take all the time you need. And Nicholas, thank you. Thank you for making this sacrifice for us. I know it's not easy." I shook my head. "It's not a sacrifice, it's an investment in our future. And frankly, after tasting what we have, returning to a simple professional relationship with you would be impossible. In any case, I began discreetly looking for a new position, and as Camille had predicted with my experience and her recommendations, I quickly received several interesting offers. In February, I accepted a position as an executive assistant at a publishing house, a field that had long attracted me and which would perhaps allow me to reconnect with my old passion for writing. I officially handed in my resignation to Camille during a formal meeting in her office with all the required documents, maintaining a perfect professional facade, even though we both knew what lay behind it. She accepted my resignation with a small, discreet smile that no one else would have noticed and shook my hand, wishing me good luck for the future, her fingers lingering a second too long in mine. My last day at the office was strangely emotional. My colleagues organized a small farewell party with champagne and petits fours, and several of them made speeches, sympathetic comments about my professional qualities. Camille stayed away from me for most of the celebration, maintaining her usual distance. But just before I left, she called me into her office. She closed the door behind us, and for the first time in weeks, we were alone in a professional setting. "Nicholas," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "I wanted to tell you personally how much I've appreciated your work these past 2 years. You've been an exceptional assistant, and I know you're going to succeed brilliantly in your new position." Then she lowered her voice and added, "Just for me. And tonight, come to my house. We will properly celebrate the beginning of our real life together." That evening, in his apartment, we opened a bottle of vintage champagne and toasted our freedom. Freedom to be together without hiding, without fear of judgment or professional consequences, without having to maintain a facade. It was exhilarating and scary at the same time. "Do you realize that now we're going to have to face the real world?" Camille sipping her champagne. "People will talk. My family, my friends, my colleagues. They will all have an opinion about our age difference, about the fact that you were my assistant, about our relationship in general. Are you ready for this?" I put down my glass and took her in my arms. "I'm ready for anything. As long as it's with you, let them talk. Their opinion is irrelevant compared to what we have built together." And indeed, when the news of our relationship spread, and it spread quickly, like all interesting news in the Parisian professional world, the reactions were mixed. Some of our former colleagues were genuinely happy for us. Others were skeptical, betting our relationship wouldn't last. Still others were downright nasty, implying that I slept with my boss to advance my career, or that Camille was having a midlife crisis, and I was just a toy for her. The hurtful comments were numerous, and even if we tried to ignore them, they left their mark. One evening, after a particularly difficult dinner with some of Camille's former colleagues who couldn't help but make disparaging remarks about our relationship, I found her sitting on her sofa, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she told me. "I'm so sorry to put you through all this. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm selfish for wanting to be with you when it's causing you so much trouble." I sat down next to her and wiped away her tears. "Stop! You're not selfish, and I don't want to hear about regret. These people are miserable in their own lives, and they project their bitterness onto us. It has nothing to do with us, with what we really have. Do you remember what you told me that first night at my house, that you wanted to stop being afraid and just live? That's what we do, we live. And yes, it's complicated. And yes, people judge. But look at us, we're happy, really happy. When have you been this happy before me?" She thought, then shook her head. "Never, I've never been this happy, so it's worth it. All the stupid comments, all the unsolicited opinions, it's all worthless compared to what we have." Months passed, and gradually we found our balance. I excelled in my new position at the publishing house, where my organizational experience and communication skills were greatly appreciated. Camille continued to shine in her career, but with one notable difference. She had found a work-life balance. She no longer stayed at the office until 10 p.m. every night. She took weekends off. She said no to certain projects to preserve her time with me, and she was happier, more relaxed, more herself. Her colleagues noticed the change, and even those who had been skeptical at first had to admit that our relationship was doing her good. We moved into a new apartment together. Not hers, not mine, but ours. A beautiful, bright space near Parc Monceau that we decorated together, blending our styles and creating a real home. For the first time in her life, Camille's apartment felt warm, personal, and alive. There were photos of us on the walls, books piled everywhere, houseplants, colorful cushions, all those little details that transform a house into a real home. A year after our first night together, we moved back to my old apartment on the Canal Saint-Martin, which I hadn't yet given up. Because the lease wasn't up yet. We sat on the same couch where she'd slept that first night and laughed, remembering how it all began. "Do you remember your face when you opened the door and saw me standing there?" Camille said, laughing. "I thought you were going to have a heart attack." I laughed. I couldn't believe it. My boss, the ice woman, standing in my doorway with wine and roast chicken. It was completely surreal. "The ice woman," she repeated thoughtfully. "That's how you saw me. That's how everyone else saw you. But you were never an ice woman. You just built yourself a suit of armor to protect yourself, and you let me see what was underneath." She kissed me gently. "You know what was funny about that night? I didn't even really know why I was coming to your house. I just had this impulse, this need to not being alone, and your face came to mind. Now I understand why a part of me already knows, even if I didn't consciously realize it yet. You were the one I needed, the one who would save me from my own prison." "I didn't save you," I said. "You saved yourself. You made the decision to knock on my door, to open your heart, to choose love over fear. All I did was be there to welcome you." She smiled. "You were always there for 2 years at the office. You were there every day, discreet and reliable, and I didn't realize how much I needed that constant presence. And now you're still here, but in such a deeper, truer way. I can no longer imagine my life without you, Nicolas. You became my anchor, my refuge, my home." Those words touched me deeply. "And you became my reason. Before you, I lived on autopilot, doing my work, going home, starting again the next day. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't truly alive either. You woke me up. You showed me what it was like to love truly, deeply, without holding back." We lay cuddled on that couch, in that apartment that had witnessed the beginning of our story, and I realized how much we had both changed. Camille was no longer the cold, distant woman who terrorized boardrooms. She laughed easily, she was tactile and affectionate. She spoke of her feelings without fear. And I was no longer the somewhat lost young man who was content with a stable job and a life without surprises. I had found my voice, my confidence, my courage. We had transformed each other, each bringing to the other what they lacked, creating together something greater than the sum of our individual parts. This was true love. I realized now, not the all-consuming passion of romantic movies, but this deep connection, this mutual understanding, this daily choice to choose the other again and again, despite the difficulties. A few months later, during a weekend in Normandy when we went to visit my parents who had immediately adored Camille, despite or perhaps because of the age difference, seeing in her a strong and loving woman who made their son happy, we walked on the beach near the village where I had grown up. It was a beautiful spring day. The sun shone on the water, the seagulls cried overhead, and we walked barefoot in the wet sand, hand in hand. At one point, Camille stopped and faced me. She looked nervous, which was rare for her. "Nicolas, I have something to ask you." My heart started beating faster. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "We have been together for over a year now, and every day I love you a little more. You have transformed my life in ways that I would never have believed possible. Before you, I thought my destiny was to be alone, to compensate for the absence of love with professional success. But you showed me that you could have both, that I deserved to have both." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. It took my brain a few seconds to process what was happening. She knelt in the sand in front of me and opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant wedding band. "Nicolas, I know that traditionally it's the man who proposes, but nothing about our relationship has been traditional from the beginning. So why start now? Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Not in spite of our differences, but because of her. Will you continue to show me how to live, how to love, how to be happy?" I was speechless. My boss, this woman I had thought untouchable, barely a year ago, was on her knees in front of me on a Normandy beach, asking me to marry him. Tears welled up in my eyes and I pulled him towards me, kissing him with all the passion and love I felt. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. "Yes, of course, yes. 1,000 times yes." We got married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony in a small chateau near Lyon, surrounded by our families and closest friends. Some colleagues were invited, those who had supported our relationship from the beginning, and even Mark, the partner who had made derogatory remarks, came and sincerely apologized for his past behavior. The ceremony was simple but elegant, just like Camille. She wore a flowing white dress that made her look even more beautiful than usual. And when she entered on the arm of her uncle, her father no longer being there to accompany her, I felt my heart swell with such intense happiness that I had difficulty breathing. Our wishes were personal and sincere. I talked about that first night she appeared at my door, changing my life forever. She talked about how I had broken down the walls she had built around her heart, showing her that it was possible to be both strong and vulnerable. Ambitious and loving, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience as we exchanged rings. Today, 3 years after that November night when it all began, we are happier than ever. Camille is still a senior partner in her firm, still brilliant and respected, but she has learned to delegate, to trust her team, and not to carry the entire weight of the world on her shoulders. I became an editor at my publishing house, working with authors to bring their stories to life. And I even started writing my own novel, encouraged by Camille, who reads every chapter with enthusiasm and gives me honest feedback. We sometimes talk about having children, even though at 43 Camille hesitates, worried about the risks and challenges. But we are in no hurry. We savor every moment together. We travel when we can. We have movie nights on our couch. We have long dinners or talk for hours like we did in my old apartment. People sometimes ask us how we knew he was the one, how we had the courage to overcome all the social and professional barriers that separated us. And I always answer the same thing. We didn't know. We just chose to try again and again, day after day. Love is not something that falls from the sky. It is a constant choice, a mutual effort, a desire to truly see the other in all their complexity and beauty, and to accept them completely. Camille could have never knocked on my door that night. She could have returned to her empty apartment and continued her lonely life. I could have slammed the door in his face, finding the situation too strange, too complicated. But we both made the choice of courage, the choice of openness, the choice of love. And that choice changed everything. Sometimes at night, when we are lying in bed in the dark, just before falling asleep, Camille whispers, "Do you live alone?" And I always reply with a smile, "No, not anymore, never again." It's become our little private joke, our way of reminding each other where we came from and how lucky we are to have found each other. This simple question asked on a Wednesday afternoon in a Parisian office was the beginning of everything. She broke the silence, opened a door, created a possibility, and we had the courage to walk through that door together, hand in hand, to discover what awaited us on the other side. What we found was love. Not the perfect love of fairy tales, but real, complicated, beautiful love. The one who transforms, who heals, who gives meaning to everything else. The love that's worth fighting for, worth taking risks for, worth questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself for. Love, which ultimately is the only thing that really matters. Yeah,